Amanda, thank you so much for being on the Be Love podcast. I wonder where you might like to start. It'd be great to hear a little bit of your story of how you chose to become a minister. What was your early formation in love like as a kid, as a teenager, as a young person? What can you tell us about that?
So I feel like when you're starting to be a pastor or maybe might be a pastor, you get the question about your call story a lot.
Yeah.
And so in the Presbyterian church, the sense for calling is that it doesn't come from an individual. It's not that you have discerned that God has called you, therefore you will go do this thing. It is that the community discerns the sense of call. And so it's in that love of community and that formation of community collectively and then up with individuals that we sort of come to that understanding that perhaps we are, or maybe we are called. And so for me, my sense of call started like very acutely started when I was leaving a church meeting, because that is a super Presbyterian thing to do, is to have lots of church meetings. So many meetings. So it was a church officer nominating committee meeting, and I was in high school, and our church was open and included young people, high school students, on a lot of their committees. And so I was exiting the committee, and the building had a couple of doors. And so most of the committee members exited one door, and the pastor and I exited another door. And he said, "So you're called to ministry?" And I said, "No, I'm going to be a psychologist." And he's like, "Well, it's not so bad." And then he started talking about how some people are afraid of preaching, and it's not a big deal. And he kind of went on, and the conversation, ended. I walked home, and he went to his car. And I remember thinking, that was so odd. What was that about? Why did that happen? And then at that point, I started kind of looking around more carefully at my life and my interests and my time and what I was passionate about and where I felt called to be. And the answer was top of the list every time was church-related things, whether it was youth group or youth-related activities or committees or any of that stuff, over and above everything else that I was involved in at the time. The real story of being formed in love, right, goes way back, right? It goes back to when you were a tiny child. It goes back generations. So I feel like that could be a very, very long story. For me, I always remember being in church. I don't remember ever not being in church. There's a picture of me being baptized in my grandparents' church, which was founded by a great, great, great uncle in the 1700s, who was a pastor. And that was my father's family's church all the way up until my father. And I think my uncle is still a member of that church. It's Bethany Presbyterian Church in North Carolina in Statesville. And so I always remember being in church. I found out later when I was older that my parents didn't go to church when I was an infant. They came to North Carolina for the baptism. They were not terribly interested in being in church. And they ended up taking me later on when I was 2. So 2 years old, you don't remember that much when you're young. So my memory is always in church. But the truth of the matter was that they took me later, and they took me because there had been several cults active in the United States at the time.
Wow.
Well, in the 1970s, right, there were some Kool-Aid centered cults. And so my parents, my father was raised Presbyterian, as I mentioned, and my mother's family was raised Southern Baptist. And my mother had an adverse reaction to her upbringing, did not appreciate this at times very belligerent theology that can be present in that church. And so my father, which is often the case with Presbyterians, sadly, felt very like, about church. And so while my parents met at a Catholic folk mass in the 1960s, they were not terribly actively religious for probably close to 15 years as a married couple, and then ended up finding they kind of talked about it. My mom was like, "Well, we're not going that way." And my dad's like, "Well, the Presbyterians aren't so bad." So we ended up at a Presbyterian church.
So how did they end up at the folk mass if they were not that religious at the time when they met?
I mean, they were definitely in training to be hippies. All the kids were doing it, kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah. If you did not like the war and you were pro civil rights, you were probably hanging out at a Catholic folk mass. Like it was just the thing to do in Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina in the 1960s.
So you had this feeling of always being at church, and church was where you wanted to be. What are some of those early memories of church? Like, what was it to be at church as a young kid?
Yeah. So so I have a few very distinct early memories. So one is at my Presbyterian grandmother's church, so the one that I was baptized in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that she always kept lifesavers in her purse. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't at that point in time, off and on in both of the congregations I grew up in, they were smaller. There would be Sunday school sometimes and there wouldn't be other times. And so I have memories of being in a Sunday school classroom with a felt board and or a church nursery with an abundance of toys and, people I didn't know, but like playing
Yeah.
and having a pleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the sanctuary, my memories are my grandmother popping lifesavers that used to come in a roll and now for some reason don't anymore. I don't know
Wow.
why. I don't know why
Yeah.
the candy company made that choice, but they did. So now they're not in a roll anyway, but she used to pop them out of the roll. I think to keep us quiet, honestly. It's like if the kid is sucking on a piece of candy, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
not be loud during the prayers and at the off
Mm-hmm.
times when the adult up front is talking in a very long-winded manner for a child.
Uh-huh.
So so I have that memory. That church also at one point had a children's sermon where we got to come up to the front row.
Yeah.
And this never happened in my childhood church, the one that I grew up in DC it was Capitol Hill Presbyterian Church. So that they didn't do children's time, but this one church one time with one pastor did. And I remember coming to the front row and getting to sit on the front pew and getting a lot of attention from the pastor because all the children were lined up. And he gave us a card with a penny taped to it and then talked about treasure in heaven. And I didn't understand really like now, really what that meant. I just remember the feeling of feeling special and feeling
Yeah.
like this part of the service was important.
Mm-hmm.
I remember showing up an hour late for church on daylight savings time when we were visiting one of my grandmothers because the clocks hadn't changed and my dad was like, "We're late for church," and we come like crashing in and like it's the last hymn in the benediction. Anyway, those are the more silly memories. A silly memory about the church in DC is so this church was a smaller congregation, very theologically diverse, and we had our sanctuary on the top floor. So like imagine a more urban city church where there's like levels. So the top floor, so steeple, sanctuary, and then social hall on the main floor, and then there was a church basement as well where like food happened, right? So the social hall had like classrooms off the back, and anyway, so I have memories of that. And then there was a period of time when we couldn't worship in the sanctuary. And what happened is we had a lot of members that were from various backgrounds, and one of them happened to be unhoused, and he lived in the alley behind the church. And there was a lightning strike, and it hit the steeple. The church caught fire, and he called 911 and saved the church building. But the sanctuary was fire damaged, and so for a period of time, we were out of the sanctuary. So what I remember, because I was very young, was not any of that. That story I heard later. What I remember is being in the Sunday school rooms down the way, and I was not a well-behaved child at all. And I think I got rambunctious and made a break for it. But so what I remember is, storming down the hallway at full speed and then coming like right into a room full of quiet adults and going, and realizing I had messed up because I had interrupted the church service, which was now happening in the main floor kind of fellowship space or whatever, that gathering, and then the kitchen in the basement. And then I was an acolyte, so I got to carry for a child, very heavy brass pole with a long wick and do all the candles and put them out and wear a funny robe. And I had happy memories of all of that. And yeah, it was just a really loving place. There was a Capitol Hill Easter parade every single year. All the churches got together after their 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock service, probably 11 o'clock service. And we would just like pack out the streets and parade from our church buildings down to a park and have a big party. And I remember, the Easter finery and being in the parade. So that was my first congregation until I was 10. And then we moved to Alexandria, Virginia, and my parents managed to buy a house that was directly across the street from a Presbyterian church. And they said they were like, we don't know which church, like we're going to let the kids pick a church. So we did the church shopping thing where you visit a couple of places, and it just made sense to go to the church that happened to be across the street. Now, the downside of being across the street from the church you attend is that you are not allowed to miss anything because they just come and get you. So one day I was like, I am skipping youth group. I don't want to. I want to sit home and watch TV. I've had a busy weekend. And there's Jim and Diane on the, my mom's like, Amanda, Fine.
So it really was, you really were always at church. It was really like literally physically a part of your life being so close.
Yeah. I mean, the bus stop was at the corner, like it was like my bedroom window, church property, corner bus stop, like right there. So I could be there very easily. Like there was no commute time like there is today. There's a commute to church today, but
and then it was at a meeting and you were a teenager serving on this committee. What do you think this pastor saw in you at that moment that stirred that conversation? Or did you ever get to talk to him about it afterwards?
It's funny. I never really pinned him down on it. So what happened is I, looked around and kind of said, why would he talk to me about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started sort of mentioning it. I was like, yeah, this funny thing happened. And people are like, oh yeah, no, that's for sure. You're going to probably be a pastor. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And so I ended up in like all these, because I was on these various committees. So like some in the church, some with the regional governing body, the Presbytery. So I just ended up in a lot of conversation. I mean, 15, right? I had years to finish high school. So probably within a year and a half, I was sort of settled, like, okay, probably all the things that I wanted to be throughout my life make a lot of sense in the context of ministry. So when I was growing up, the very first thing that I wanted to be was, because, when you're a kid, just whatever you've seen. So my parents, for some reason, decorated my room in a like circus theme. So my childhood bedroom had circus things happening on the walls, pictures. And so there was a woman on a horse, like doing a pirouette or something, right? So she was a bareback rider in the circus. And I was like, that looks cool.
That's me.
I'll take that job. So the very first thing I wanted to be was a bareback rider in the circus. Then I got a little bit older. I was like, well, I do like helping people, like nurses seem nice. And I was very quickly told, no. You need to be a doctor, not a nurse. If you're interested in medicine, like you need to like really aim high. And I was like, okay, whatever that means. Then, did a little more school, found the math to be challenging, found the science to be not super enjoyable. So the steer, maybe psychiatry, psychology, maybe I can help people with words, and maybe it doesn't have to be a bunch of equations and really strong understanding of chemistry. Yeah. And then I ended up, with the pastor idea, because it requires, you get to help people. It requires balance, like the bareback rider in the circus needs. Yeah, and it sort of meets a lot of that, and it combines my love for humanity and for the Lord, all of it. So
all of it there, and a little fun, a little bit of circus fun when you're with kids, or
I have to say, I try really hard not to. I told this story once for an interview really early in ministry, like year one. And she's running back the quotes to me, the reporter, right? And she's like, this, whatever. And I was like, I did not call the church a circus. And she was like, I think you did. I was like, no, I didn't. Don't.
Are you more comfortable making that analogy now after a couple decades of ministry? No.
Nope. Trying real hard to not slam the church. We love the church and the people and all the messiness of it.
Well, it's not necessarily a negative. I guess maybe it depends on your association with what a circus is, but
correct.
I think of it as an experience of delighting in humanity and all the things we can create and be. And
if that's how you see a circus, great. If you see a circus as a disaster, like
yeah. So how long has it been now that you've been serving in the church? Has it been 20 years now?
Yeah. I just passed the 20-year anniversation. I think you and I were ordained the same year.
I think it was the same year. Yeah. So what has that journey been like? What has that arc been like in terms of your following this call?
Yeah, it's never as linear as you imagine, right? Like nothing when you're following God is terribly linear, is what I've learned. So I grew up in these, small kind of solo pastor churches, and small meaning, under 100, couple through 200-300. But the point was, there was only one pastor, right? So that's for sure what I thought. I was like, well, that's how it is. There's all, you grow up in a family, you're like, doesn't everybody have a brother? Oh, okay. Not everybody has a brother, right? And so I grew up in one pastor churches. I assumed that's what it was. That's how it would be. The church I attended in college, the two churches I attended in college were, because I switched colleges, were one pastor churches, solo pastor churches. And then I went to seminary and I found opportunities to work in a multi-staff church. I'm like, well, gotta try that on for size. So I did that.
Yeah.
So I had 2 seminary internships, one at a, I don't even know how big it is now. I barely remember, but like, we're going to say more than 1,000 members. So they had probably 3 or 4 pastors. There were 3, I think 3 pastors on staff and 1 vacant position when I was there for that one summer, in Severna Park, Maryland. And it was a lovely congregation, wonderful people. And it's just so fascinating to learn a different way to do church. Like when you have multiple services, when you have all these groups, how do you maintain connection and a sense of community when there's literally 1,000 people that you theoretically should be touching base with? And what does that look like? And, in some ways it makes it exciting and it multiplies the opportunities for connection and for relationship building. And in other ways it can cause barriers and cause people who are first timers to not feel like they can, make a connection. And so, so that was super interesting.
Was there a way of bringing people together in that big of an environment?
So honestly, most churches, once you have an orbit of probably more than 100 members, you're going to rely on some kind of small group.
Right.
In fact, the Garden Church is very likely headed that way. It's not the case that our Sunday worship is 100, but I mean, when we sit down and make a list of the people that we see once a month or even every other month, I mean, it's getting there. I mean, yeah, it's getting that sense of bigness. And it's funny because I've had 2 conversations actually in the last week about this. One of them was, oh, did you know so-and-so, this person and this person hadn't met? I was like, they've been attending for 3 years. They have to have met. They both work in environmental fields. Why have they not met? I'm like, no, they've been at these, like, I can imagine them in the sanctuary, in different spots, together at the same time. And the comment from Pastor Connie was, no, they'd never had a conversation. I'm like, what? What? And so this is, it's so, anyway, there's that. But in the larger churches, there ends up being a lot more intentional connecting, like is kind of usually the term they use. But honestly, it could help all of us, right? Like, unless you've got the same 20 people who've known each other for a decade or 2, you kind of need that. And even then you need something to integrate new people if you're going to have, actively try to integrate and to be open that way. Okay. So that was the first seminary church. But let me back up and talk about my college church. My college church was super unique. The second college church I attended. This one was in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And it was founded off of a house church model. And here's like one of these weird, Jane Siebert would call it God-dippity moments, which I feel like happens to everybody. And maybe you pick up on it, maybe you don't. But this is the ones. The founder of this church, which I didn't learn for about a year and 2 years. I'd been there a year or 2 years. It was time for like the annual retreat. And they're like, oh, Don and Betty Allen are back. And I'm like, Don Allen? And I turn around and like 4 or 5 rows behind me is my childhood pastor from Washington, D.C. He and his wife left the congregation in D.C. and founded the church in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Wow.
And there were 2 Presbyterian churches in town. And I went to the first one on my first Sunday in college and listened to the sermon, found it objectionable, looked around, saw lots of heads nodding and was like, not for me. Left, went to the second Presbyterian church in town, fell in love. And it was founded by my childhood pastor, right? Crazy. Or not that crazy because it's like 2-hour drive. I don't know. Who knows?
Very cool.
We'll let you decide. Very small Presbyterian. But what's fascinating about that church is it's not just any old church. It's this house church model. And you're going to say, like, what is that? And maybe Don made it up. I don't know. Maybe it fell out of the 1970s. I don't know. Or maybe Don founded that church and went to DC afterwards. I'm not really sure. Anyway, point is, the church is set up like this. There are no committees. What? Okay, so no committees at all. No, there are meetings. Okay. There's a session, which is a church board equivalent. But apart from that, nothing in the church happens on a routine, ongoing basis. It only happens when there is a sense of call in the community to have that thing happen. So every year in the fall, they have a big old meeting. And in the big old meeting, they pray and discern what house churches people feel called to be a part of or to organize that year. So for example, pretty much every year that I was there anyway, there was a Restoring Creation house church, so focused on environmental action. There was a house church focused on drama and the arts and that sort of thing. So each time there would be some kind of, if there was enough energy, and then people would kind of stand up and they would join these house churches. And then 3 weeks out of the month, we met in our sanctuary. And I should back up and say, the physical building the church met in was a very old farmhouse where a couple of like a wall had been knocked down. So the whole front sanctuary area used to be the dining room and primary living room area. And then the bedrooms were meeting rooms, and the little parlor was a smaller meeting room. And then there was an office, 2 offices in the back for the pastor and for the secretary. So 3 Sundays a month we're in the sanctuary, we're all together. 1 Sunday a month we are wherever the house church is. And so the Restoring Creation House Church is definitely up on a mountain. So it was super cool. There are so many ways to be church, to do church, to exhibit God's love in the world. It's really super fun.
Do you think that experience kind of was a part of what brought you to the Garden Church one day? Like, kind of, did it give you a love for alternative ways of being church?
I think I've always had an interest for alternative ways of being church, just because, I don't know, because why not, right? Like, why not have creativity?
Because you wanted to ride bareback in the circus. I mean, it's just part of your personality.
Listen, I don't want to be bored, okay? Like,
yeah.
No, I mean, one of the wonderful, there's a lot of really wonderful things about being in ministry professionally, and one of them is the flexibility and the opportunities to do new and different things, and to not be stuck for 40 hours a week. I mean, it is first installed position, called an installed position. I was in youth ministry, which is, I just remember thinking, like, I can't believe I'm being paid to throw water balloons at people. Like, this is my job. And it's not always easy and perfect and whatever. And it can be exhausting to do a sleepover, what do they call it? A lock-in the church, and then run a service the next morning. But also, like, it's special and it's memories, and it's, so anyway, and then another seminary church I served was at the time the largest African-American Presbyterian church in the country. And so it's Elmwood United Presbyterian Church, and they had 2 sites. They had a primary location, and then 1 city over, they had a satellite location that they were in the process of setting up and discerning, like, if the community was ready for another congregation. And so I remember getting to preach there and getting to understand how churches are planted and what that kind of thing looks like, and what can be unique about a culturally identified church. So it was African-American, but it was an international church. It had the African diaspora present as well. And so there were, I think, 7 or 8 nations represented in that congregation. So that was incredible and special. And yeah. So anyway, all of it's fun.
In seminary, a lot of different exposure to different kinds of being church. And so then youth ministry was your first called position?
It was my first installed position. It was my second called position. This is all like Presbyterian minutia.
Sure.
Oh, and then my clinical pastoral education was at a mental health hospital in Washington, D.C., St. Elizabeth's. And so that was formative, as one might imagine.
Sure. Did you enjoy that? I know you mentioned psychology had been an interest when you were studying.
Yeah, I super enjoyed it. I got to get to know the DSM. It was 4 at the time, but the DSM manual. And I remember being kind of unsure when I was discerning, because the other thing I was interested in was like a level 1 trauma center. Like, I was like, I want to see the hard stuff. Bring me a medevac helicopter. I want to pray. Like, I was like, really like taken with all the seminary stories of like the gunshot victim on the brink. And I'm like, yes, let's pray. Something might be wrong with me, but anyway,
have an adventurous spirit that is definitely coming out in this conversation. Yeah,
apparently. But anyway, this call in Severna Park, Maryland, one of my colleagues there was a practicing psychologist and then took a call to ministry later in life. And so she talked a lot about, because I was like, I don't know, like, what am I really going to learn in a mental health hospital? Like, that's pretty extreme. And she was like, it's all a spectrum. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, little anxiety, lots of anxiety, medicated, not medicated, all the spectrum. And I was like, huh. And then that summer there was someone had I think it was actually medical drug interaction, but she had a psychotic episode. So it was, you learn a lot. The more you get ministry experience, the more you learn. So
you definitely get exposed to all the things of life. So I could imagine that being incredibly useful to have that experience in the mental hospital. And
it's been helpful over the years. It is more acutely helpful right now at the Garden Church, just because we do have a larger population of people with mental illness.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I don't know if that's the urban nature of our environment. or what, but
this time on the planet, who knows exactly.
that I see it everywhere now. Maybe that. No, just kidding. No, I hope not. I hope that's not what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What else happened before you got to the Garden Church?
What else happened before I got to the Garden Church? Okay, so I finished seminary feeling like very well educated with my three experiences and the degree and all of the stuff and the testing and whatever. And then my first ordained call, the call to which I was ordained to, was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was a unique call. It was part of the Lilly, the Resident and Parish Ministry Program. So Eli Lilly, the drug company, they're good Christians and they fund lots of things. And one of the things that they funded at the time, and I don't know if they still do, I think they slowly backed off of it, but for about a decade, they were funding these resident and parish ministry programs. And here was the concept behind them. Their concept was, there seemed to be a lot of pastors graduating seminary with these degrees of 3 years, and they drop out within the first 5 years. They quit being pastors. And why is that happening? And what can we do about it? Now, this is, Sage, you and I have been around 20 years in this job. So this was like 25 to 30 years ago, this was happening. Yeah. This is not what's happening today. Today, there are not enough of us, and many, many people should try to get this job if they feel called. But anyway, so at the time, that's what was going on. And so the theory was, what if we can collect up a crop of these clergy, beginning early clergy, new to be ordained, and give them a positive experience in ministry for 2 years. So we're going to send them, this was the concept, we're going to send them to large, well-functioning congregations. Now, who vetted these places? I don't know. Right. But how are you going to, really? Is there a well-functioning congregation? Paper and practice are different. Anyway, so I'm being really jokey about it. But
it's a good observation though. How does that get chosen?
You never really know. So basically here's what happened. A bunch of tall steeples in the mainline denominations, including Presbyterians. And I'm saying the tallest, shiniest steeples in the country, mostly close to Indiana, because they wanted to bring us back to the mothership for check-in once a year. So we had to go to a Lilly retreat in Indiana. But yeah, so First Presbyterian in Ann Arbor is the church that I took my first call in. And it was it's such a unique and different way to start ministry, because here I was, whole life thought that every church gets a pastor. That's it, just the one, right? And then I show up and I am one of 7 on the staff. So there were 3 Lilly residents. So there were 3 Lilly residents, a campus minister, and then 3 other pastors. So there was a part-time executive pastor who was basically in charge of us, and he was an octogenarian, probably not, but he was very, very 50 years of ministry experience. Then there was a head of staff and the campus minister, and then the 3 of us. And so the four offices were in a row on the lower level of the church. It was all of the 20, 25 and under crowd. So it was the campus minister who graduated the year before me from my seminary, Megan, who was in seminary with me, and then me, and then Andrew, all in a row. All of us all together. And so it's just a very unique and super fun and interesting and slightly dysfunctional church environment.
And you were getting kind of this Lilly support because they were really wanting you to get off on the right foot and stick it out.
Yeah. So so they designed the program, which I'm in hindsight super. And at the time I was kind of chafing because I was I really just want to be on my own. I know you guys, I went to seminary.
You were just ordained.
I know everything. Do you know how much I know? I passed all of the tests. Why am I here? So there was a little bit of that going on. So that is very typical newly ordained ego. That is just, I'd like to say I met a freshly minted seminarian who didn't have it, but I have never. Yeah. I've never ever met that. It's just, it comes with the degree. You know what it is? I think it's the title. It's the title. And it's the Master of Divinity term. Sure. Master of Divinity.
It's a little intense.
It's hard to not have a lot of ego after you've earned a master's in divinity. So anyway, so there it is. Right. Where was I? So they arranged it like a doctor's residency program. So here we are in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there is this large teaching hospital for University of Michigan, and there is this church. And so the residents who attended our church services did their rotations at their hospital, and we did our rotations in ministry. And so I had, we all had pastoral care the whole time, because that's just like what we should all be able to do. So we always had pastoral care. We always had our visit list. We always went to the hospitals and checked in and did all those things. And then I managed to end up in like a rotation in something like building and grounds. And I was like, okay. So I'm like sitting through these meetings, and they're like, the buttresses must be appointed. And I was like, I'm sorry, what's a buttress? Yeah. What do you appoint it? But pointing it? We're sticking metal in it to make sure it doesn't fall down. Well, that does seem like a good idea. Like, it was just,
but we don't really learn about buttresses in seminary, but there's a whole lot of pastors out there that have to be in meetings where we talk about buttresses. If you have
buttresses, right?
Church building. Yeah.
So that was Lilly got it right. I was very skeptical, which is my nature. But anyway, so I learned what a buttress is. And got a better sense of appreciation for physical church buildings and a healthy respect for what that does to congregations. Because most of us are in physical church buildings, and we often undervalue it, and we often neglect it. And it is this, it's a balance, right? We've got to figure out sort of who we are. So, for what seminary is 3 years, right? So 3 years before, I'm in the church with the buttresses. So like you now know that this was a cathedral style of church. I mean, this was like the long aisle and the massive sanctuary and the membership of 1,400 and just big, everything big, right? We go back to the house church in my memory, and we think about there were no buttresses. That church also made a commitment in its stewardship that for every dollar they spent on themselves and their physical building and their kind of comfort, they would spend $1 in mission. And so when they went to replace the chairs that were movable in the sanctuary, they were not pews, they agonized over how many chairs they would buy, because that would be matched dollar for dollar with mission giving. And then I'm in this massive church with cathedrals and buttresses. And then I had a quarter life crisis. And where I came home to my apartment and was like, what am I doing with my life? I am surrounded by all of these people and all of this, in my mind, apparent wealth, right? And it's true. I mean, there were auto executives, like there were people who were very comfortable. And I thought, this is like, why? This is not, I was called to comfort the afflicted, and now I'm supposed to afflict the comfortable. Like, this is, I'm not into it. And I called my mom and explained this all to her, and, like through tearful eyes, I'm like, I'm 25, 20, like turning 26. My birthday's coming. What am I doing? And she was like, Amanda, the system's not going to pay you with it. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, also, you need a paycheck. And I was like, you're right. So yeah, there's a lot in ministry where we feel called to the margins. And sometimes our call is also right in the belly of the beast. Yeah. Not that I don't love the people in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They're lovely, and the church is lovely, and the mission was strong.
Sure.
And it's easy. It's easy to get caught up in trappings.
Yeah. After your mother gave you that talk, were you able to shift something? And did you end up staying and thinking of it differently, or what happened?
Yeah. It was like a good sober reality check, that it's like you can do the things, but you need to figure out how to do them, and in a way that also allows you to sustain your own ability to pay bills. And so what that meant was that I ended up spending more of my clergy hours to some extent, but also just volunteer hours, putting on a clerical collar and driving over to Lansing, Michigan to lobby in the halls of power over there. It meant that I spent more time in the interfaith community and more time with the groups that were working on recidivism rates in the prison system in Michigan at the time. It meant that I invested a lot more of my personal time in those areas, which sometimes aligned with the mission of the church and at the time, and sometimes they didn't. This is just how it is in all of life, right? Like, not everything. Yeah. I don't know. We have a congregation member who's looking for a job right now, and he's really hoping for one that aligns meaningfully. He's looking for gainful employment that meaningfully aligns with his values. We all want that.
Right.
And life is long, and sometimes it doesn't always align perfectly. Yeah. Is what I'm going to say.
I love that. And did you find that as you figured out where you felt called to be, and that some things aligned with what the church wanted and some things didn't, like, what was your compass? Did you have pushback from the community, or how did you walk that path at that time?
I mean, I was one of 7, so like they didn't pay that much attention to me.
So you had a little time to be flexible.
There is some under the radar situation that happens when you're on a staff with many people. So there's that, but I absolutely, I mean, I caught some flack. In particular, what was it that had happened? It was some act of racism, violence, and bigotry. It was a cross was set on fire on a lawn in Greater Detroit. So it had happened in our extended community, right? So we were part of Detroit Presbytery. It was in Ann Arbor's suburban-ish, like 45 minutes from Detroit, but like felt like it was our problem to me as a transplant. And so I gave a sermon where I opened with that anecdote, because it's not okay. Like, and we got to talk about this stuff. And so I gave the sermon, and I can't even remember what the rest of what I said, but what I remember more than the sermon or the hateful act of bigotry and racism was my my supervisor's response. So 70-year-old white man, right? 50 years my senior, pulls me aside afterwards, and he's like, "You were really angry." And I was like, "Was I? Because I thought I was just speaking the truth. You read that as anger. So like, what's happening here?" And I don't know that I've ever over the years, because I did and do, we still exchange Christmas cards. I did and do maintain a healthy respect for him. But I don't know that we ever sorted out what happened there. I mean, was it misogyny and that women can't be mad? Was it age related? What was he looking for in that moment? Did he feel like what was needed was a more pastoral and less what's our place in it? I don't know. We never really got there. He said the thing, and I was like, okay. But remember, like, that was not that I still don't have an arrogant phase, but that was my young arrogant phase, not my now arrogant phase.
Your mature arrogant phase.
Sir of Divinity, did he not hear that? I mastered it, sir. Like, so it was so yeah, I mean, sometimes, right? Sometimes, but also like in a larger church, and honestly, in the small ones too, there's a lot of variety of people, right? And so there were people that gravitated towards what I had to say, and there were people who gravitated right away from it. You know, and it's just kind of how the entire world is, and frankly, how it's going to be in heaven. And so, like, figure it out, folks.
Well, I love that. I think that recognition of the diversity, but then how to maintain unity. I mean, these people also all continue to come and worship here. In your experiences of different churches and leading in different places, what allows for both? What allows for the having different opinions, different ways of preaching, but also keeps people in community? Do you have any wisdom with your Master of Divinity and massive experience you can share with us?
I mean, my instinct on answering that question is that it's fundamentally about relationships, which means it's about love. It's about being willing to be together in love, even when we make each other mad or annoyed. I mean, that first supervisor that I talked about, so there were 3 of us that were kind of under his tutelage. And I don't know the other, I mean, you know, like he would lead us through a meeting. We would all exit. We would all like smack talk him. But I always still had this affinity for him, right? Like there were things about his history and his stories that I found incredibly meaningful and valuable. And so I just think that I think fundamentally, if we can see each other as beloved children of God and meet each other on that level first, that we can figure out how to stay in relationship even when the going is hard. Because so in the Presbyterian Church, we have a constitution. Of course we do. Everybody's got a constitution. And in our constitution, one of the lines at the very beginning it's called the form of government, where it explains the kind of historic foundings of underpinnings of the church. And one of the lines is that, and this is old language, but it's men of faith will disagree, that like we will disagree. And so like you can be a faithful person and you can have a mutual respect, and sometimes the Spirit, it'll feel like, is leading us to different conclusions, and that's okay. Like we can have mutual forbearance as we move forward. And so that's sort of the understanding of like, I don't see it the way you do. That doesn't mean that we can't be in a relationship. That doesn't mean that we can't worship together. That doesn't mean that we can't come around a common table together, and pass the peace of Christ and break bread and do all of the things that are part of community. And I mean, in this day and age, is that a message that's hard to learn? For sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And do you feel like that has been lived out in all the ministry settings that you've been in? Have there been times when it's been more true, times when it's been challenged?
I mean, I think that anybody who's been in a church for any amount of time has seen that these things get challenged, often very regularly. And it's sort of interesting to watch kind of how it goes. Like in my younger years, I would be like, that's terrible, I'm leaving, right?
Yeah, sure.
And then there was a point, so in our denomination, on the broader, like huge level, like the national level, because PCUSA is Presbyterians are my denomination is a national denomination, not international. We had a huge fight and still continue to fight, but less so now, over the place of LGBTQ people in our churches, right? So can they be in leadership that's ordained? Because in the Presbyterian Church, we ordain our board members. Can they be in ministerial leadership? Can they be wed? All of these questions, right? And because again, like this is from 1990s, like we've been, that was in there. So I remember when it was first happening and I was like, did our church just swing the pendulum far to the right? I'm out of here. And I told my childhood pastor, I was like, I can't abide that. I'm not going to be in a church like that. That's not a church. That's not a loving church. That's not Jesus' church. And he said, well, you can go. The UCC are open and affirming. He's like, and it swung this way. It was that way before. Like odds are you waited long enough, it'll swing back. Yeah. One of my good friends was at the assembly when it happened, and she happens to be straight, but had a short haircut. And so she was put on the cover of a conservative newspaper crying with a friend and labeled as a lesbian. And she was like, I don't really care, not a lesbian, but also none of your business. And so anyway, and she was planning to sort of stay and fight kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I will. And we did, and it's changed. And the churches that didn't want to be in our sandbox anymore left. And that was terrible. Yeah. Because I was out here by the time that happened, and I was the secretary for the Presbytery. And one of the worst things I've had to do in my ordained years of ministry is to sign the paperwork for a congregation that was leaving our denomination. And this was a congregation that was led by an out gay pastor that was half members who were LGBTQ identifying. Many of them were married, and they left the denomination because they were sick of their children being called bastards. And the amount of pain that's so painful for someone who has been on the side of inclusivity to then have to sign, like I was the signature to allow them to leave, to go join the UCC. And we had churches going the other way as well who were leaving for other reasons. But that was the first one I signed, was somebody leaving for the reason, the opposite of what I had been fighting for and living for. So it is often the case that we don't do a good job seeing each other as beloved children of God, that we bring lenses of judgment and of earthly things, measuring sticks to each other and forgetting that God is the judge, not us. It's super common for humans and for Christians.
It's super common. And I commend you. I mean, obviously we all make different choices, but for making that choice to stay in the mess of it all, to stay in the mix of it all, and to see it through, and then to have to to have to sign that paper. It's so interesting to what do you think you learned from that experience? Just that it sucks.
Yeah, I don't know that. So, okay, here's where my Presbyterian roots come out. I'm going to be like, I learned that sin is real. Like that we are going to, no matter how hard we try, mess up and hurt one another. And the thing about the sort of like tale of all time, right? That story of that church, that is not different than the letter from a Birmingham jail where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, shame on the white moderates who are telling us to slow down, that now isn't the time. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And so this is sort of, I'm going to just say, a continual struggle for me because I see the sin in the world. And when I say sin, I'm talking about all of it, right? Like I had a professor who would say unrepentant. He's like, I'm an unrepentant capitalist. And I was like, that is a sin. So all of it. And I don't know. I feel more called to and comfortable, maybe not good, but I feel more called to a position where I try very hard, even if I won't ever really understand, but like try hard to understand where people are coming from for the sake of love and community.
Yeah.
And what that means is sometimes I'm asking people to suffer unfairly, right? Like that's the dilemma, is like, when is it abusive and you just can't, it's not safe for you to be here anymore? And when is it mutual forbearance? Yeah. And these are real questions that I still struggle with. These are wrestling questions for me.
They're questions, it seems to me, that are meant to be struggled with. Like that you can't, there's no one solution that would allay the struggle. It's about being in the struggle and being in the midst of it. So, yeah.
And then exiting when it's become abusive and it's not safe for you anymore. I mean, right? Because that's why they left.
Yeah.
They were like, my kids are 12 now. How am I supposed to explain this to them? And I was like, well, I mean, I okay.
Yeah. Right. And then to honor each other in the different choices that we need to make when we need to make them.
And honestly, in our church schism, that's where most of us came to, is just a sense of honoring. We were doing our best to honor. Now, when another denomination cropped up and one of my seminary classmates, like we knew each other, we didn't hang, became the first person ordained in the new denomination, I was like, well, I don't love that. Like, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? Like, we all have pathways.
We all have different pathways. And your pathway now has led you to a church in a vacant lot in a city founded by Swedenborgians.
Yeah, the Sweden what?
For a while. We've been going for a while, but what would you like to share about how love is manifesting in this ministry that you've stumbled? Do you feel like you stumbled into it? Do you feel like what would you say about your time at the Garden Church?
So I ended up on the West Coast because of my husband's desire to build, at the time, carbon fiber rockets. So he and I both have a very strong sense of calling to our respective careers. His is in engineering, and mine is ministry, obviously. And it's cool to be with somebody who loves what they do and values it the same way you do, because then there's not a lot of conversations about like, why are you at work so much? Like, you're there because you just love it.
You love it.
Yeah, you're just like, this is my happy place. Also, my home and my spouse is my happy place, and the children and all of those things. But you know, it's like, it's very good. Anyway, so I followed him out here for his career. Ended up doing a lot of volunteer ministry work, which is different and not at all like a solo pastor and lots on teams. And then I ended up, through a Presbyterian, getting introduced to Reverend Anna Wolfenden. So she and I, my colleague Amy, and another guy, the four of us, were all planting churches. We're trying to. So one was doing it kind of a college campus ministry type setting. Anna was doing hers outdoors and very eco-justice. And Amy and I were doing it in a community that we'd been guided to by the powers that be in our presbytery. And so we were all kind of working on these things together. And that's how I met Anna. And then Anna invited me to guest preach when she was out of town. And I came and I sat through a worship service. I was like, this is super different.
Yeah.
Very different than the worship services I've been a part of. I didn't really know what to expect, but it was this like unique combination of high church with other stuff, which I later learned the other stuff was very Swedenborgian, but I didn't know what that was. When I met Anna, when we first sat down, I said, oh, what denomination are you? She goes, Swedenborgian. I was like, one more time, slowly. Oh, what? What is this? Yeah, Sweden what? And it's and I was frankly annoyed because I'm a master of divinity and I did not know this term and this denomination and this man and this story and this heritage and this all of the stuff that comes with Swedenborgianism, which is, I mean, let's be real, very unique, like super duper unique, exceptionally so. And I was clueless. Less clueless now because we're like 8 years in. So like I'm getting caught up slowly. But yeah, so anyway, so then Anna was around for a while, and then Anna was like, I have fallen in love and he can't get a job here, so I have to move. And then she's like, okay, so I'm training Amanda, you and Jonathan and Asher. And I was like, cool, Jonathan and Asher will be taking over. I'm just hanging out, having a good time with cool people in an outdoor sanctuary, and it's urban, and it's like kind of all the things that I love like the most in life. Is all of that. And then Asher's like,
no horses at the Garden Church though, but maybe one day.
No, the horses are up the hill in Palos Verdes, but the truth is, like, I'm an urban girl. I grew up in DC on Capitol Hill. We walked to church. Like, this is normal to me. Like, this is super normal. Like, there was somebody who was with the Garden Church for a minute who hung out for a while, and she was like, oh, it's very urban, like with a negative connotation. And I was like, yeah, are you too bougie to be here? Like,
yeah.
So like, you know, there's a certain grittiness that comes with inner city kind of things. And I love it. I have zero problems. I'm super happy. But again, like I know people have come down the garden and gone like, ooh, and like, so not everybody's comfortable in every setting, and that's just true. And it's okay. It's not, I'm not judging. I'm just, is where I am happy. Okay. So you said, did you stumble into it? I have been telling people that I stumbled butt backwards into this. So here's how this happened. I was I was in between, right? Okay. So we had founded this church. It was like kind of getting off the ground very slowly. Amy and I up in Playa Vista is the name of the community. So we were working up there, kind of trying to do this. And I was doing her thing. Amy moved back to Texas. And I was like, this thing is not off the ground. I'm not going to be able to do it by myself because I had 2 very small children at the time. Like, I think they were like 2 and under or something, like tiny, tiny humans in my care. And my husband loves his job, so he's there a lot. And so I was letting that go. I was like figuring out what was next. I was Parish Associate, which is like volunteer pastor at another church, and kind of figuring out all of these things. And then we have this dinner, right? We're all sitting down. It's Anna, Reverend Jonathan, Reverend Asher, and myself. We're all together. And so Anna says, okay, Asher. And she turns to him and he says, well, I've broken up with my boyfriend and I'm moving to Colorado. And I'm like, jaw table. And I was like, what? That was not the plan. It's December. Anna's contract ends at the end of December. And Jonathan and Asher are to go forward co-leading this church. And now here we are, early December, like 8-ish years ago, whatever. I don't know what year it was. And I'm now like, I'm Johnny on the spot. And so I look at Jonathan, I was like, what? I mean, I had no idea walking into that dinner that I was going to walk out, basically. But also, at this point, my affinity for the Garden Church, my love for the community and the people and all that's happening there is so deep that there was absolutely no way that I was going to be part of letting the baby bird fall out of the nest. Like, that wasn't going to happen. And so Jonathan and I are like, here goes nothing. And there it is, right? And I had just had a conversation, I think, with Anna, like a month or 2 before, where I was like, I don't know what I'm called to next. And she was like, you really need to be a head pastor. And I was like, yeah, well, there's not exactly doors opening right and left for that, is there? So but thank you for your kind sentiment. Yeah. And so I was like, and so I'd had a conversation with God, because these always go very well for me, you should know, where I said, where I was like, okay, God, I've done a lot of like fumbling around. Like, the next one is going to be like on purpose, intentional, definitely called, like none of this accidental nonsense. And then here we are, like a matter of months later. And I'm like, okay. So it was like we were temporary acting co-pastors. Anna has a real gift for like reeling you in, like with a soft, light touch. And then you're like, kind of like, well, all right, you're right. I love it. I'm not leaving. So we were acting co-pastors for years. And then I think finally church board was like, would you guys please? And then we were like co-pastors. And then Jonathan retired. And then I had to like find another person. But at that moment I was like, I'm getting out. And I was like, we were trying to see like who, because here's the thing about us. I'm not a Swedenborgian. So I'm like, okay at this, but I'm like not as good as a Swedenborgian would be. Right. And so we like put out a call. There was a fresh, newly ordained, reverend, about to be reverend, who was also a master of, right. Like, anyway,
yep.
all the things, all had the masters or, anyway, so yeah. So I was like, this is it. Like the garden churches can get a full-time, full-fledged, can do all the things, not just some of the things, pastor. And and then he didn't take the call. Yeah. And then Dave was available, unexpectedly more available than he had been before. And now it's Reverend Dave and Amanda, and now Pastor Connie. And now there's a team of 3 of us. What?
You've always had a team. You've never been alone. You thought you were going to be alone this whole time. And
I totally thought I was going to be alone. Yeah.
Interesting.
Now the thing is, the truth of the matter is, right, I am half time. I'm 50% time. That's it. I started off at like 20%, something very low in the early days, because I was like, you guys, I have a lot happening. I can't. So anyway, I managed to get up to 50% time. And then Dave is very part-time. I can't remember the percentage, but like we're talking about a few hours a week from Dave and a few hours a week from Connie, but still a team. But the truth of the matter is, even when you're a solo, you still have a team. I mean, you're not playing the piano for the hymns and preaching and teaching the Sunday school, right? There's probably always going to be a team. And Presbyterians are like, we're a little hyper collaborative. Actually, we have so many committees, and the pastors don't make any decisions in the Presbyterian churches. We can only decide on what we're going to preach on, which is why I was so mad at my boss that one time. But anyway, we get to choose the hymns we sing and what we preach on, and that's all. We choose nothing else. No decisions about property, no decisions about anything. So I come from a more collaborative background, even though I definitely wanted to be like in charge of everything, because, masters.
Maybe one day, but for now, we're so
probably not.
we're so grateful for this role that you fill at the Garden Church, and the way you are faithful to God in the stumbling, maybe even sometimes. Yeah,
we're all trying to be faithful, even when we fall on our faces.
Yes. Exactly. Well, I appreciate your time, Amanda, and we'll have to do part 2 so I can hear more of the story and more of the story as it unfolds.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sage.
And I love it.